The phone in Sarah's hand crackled to life with a desperate plea for help, shattering her quiet evening. In that moment, she became the unwitting lifeline for a girl trapped in a nightmare, and the target of a ruthless trafficking ring that would stop at nothing to silence them both. Sarah Chun's fingers hovered over the cracked screen of her newly acquired second-hand phone, a faint tremor betraying her hesitation. The device, a model at least 3 years out of date, represented more than just a budget-conscious purchase. It was a tangible reminder of her life's careful arithmetic. Every decision calculated, every risk meticulously weighed. The bustling sounds of downtown Seattle filtered through her apartment's thin walls, a cacophony of car horns, distant conversations, and the persistent hum of a city perpetually in motion. Sarah's gaze drifted to the window, where raindrops raced down the glass, distorting the view of the Space Needle in the distance. The iconic structure stood as a silent sentinel, its presence a stark contrast to the turmoil about to unfold in her orderly life. With a deep breath, Sarah pressed play on the mysterious voicemail that had appeared moments after she'd activated the phone. The trembling voice that emerged from the speaker sent a chill down her spine. "Please, if anyone gets this, help us. We're trapped. I don't know where." The message cut off abruptly, leaving behind a deafening silence that seemed to swallow the ambient noise of the city. Sarah's heart raced as she replayed the message, straining to catch any additional details. The voice, young, female, and terrified, echoed in her mind, a desperate plea that threatened to shatter the careful boundaries she'd constructed around her life. For a moment, Sarah considered deleting the message, pretending she'd never heard it. It would be the safe choice, the logical one. But something in that voice, the raw fear, the undeniable humanity, tugged at a part of her she'd long thought dormant. With hands that suddenly felt clumsy, Sarah dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice was a stark counterpoint to the turmoil in her mind. 911, what's your emergency? Sarah swallowed hard. I think I've received a distress call on my phone. Someone needs help. The dispatcher's tone remained professional, but Sarah detected a hint of skepticism. Can you provide more details about the call? As Sarah recounted the brief message, her words seemed to lose substance, the urgency of the situation dissipating in the face of official procedure. By the time she finished, she could almost hear the mental shrug in the dispatcher's voice. "We'll look into it, ma'am. But without more information, there's not much we can do. It could be a prank call or a misunderstanding. If you receive any more messages, please let us know." The call ended, leaving Sarah with an gnawing sense of helplessness. She stared at the phone, willing it to reveal more secrets, to provide some clue that would spur the authorities into action. But the device remained stubbornly silent, its cracked screen reflecting her frustrated expression. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the window in a steadily increasing rhythm. Sarah moved to her small kitchen, mechanically going through the motions of making tea. The familiar routine did little to calm her nerves, each movement feeling somehow disconnected from reality. As the kettle began to whistle, a sharp knock at the door startled Sarah, causing her to nearly drop the mug she was holding. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her neighbors, what little she knew of them, weren't the type for social calls. Cautiously, she approached the door, peering through the peephole. A man in a rumpled suit stood in the hallway, his posture radiating impatience. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, Sarah opened the door, leaving the chain in place. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The man held up a badge, the gold shield catching the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway. "Detective Michael Rodriguez, Seattle PD. Mind if I come in, Miss Chun? We need to talk about that call you made." Sarah's mind raced. The speed of the response, the detective's appearance, it all seemed too quick, too convenient. Yet the badge looked real enough, and a part of her leaped at the possibility that someone was taking the distress call seriously. After a moment's hesitation, she closed the door, unlatched the chain, and reopened it fully. "Please, come in," she said, stepping aside to allow the detective entry. Rodriguez moved past her with the practiced ease of someone used to entering strangers' homes. His eyes scanned the apartment, taking in the neat stacks of accounting textbooks, the minimalist furniture, the absence of personal photos or mementos. Sarah felt exposed, as if the detective could read her entire life story in the sparse decor. "Nice place," Rodriguez commented, his tone making it clear he found it anything but. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "So, tell me about this distress call." Sarah recounted the story again, her words gaining urgency as she spoke. She described the fear in the unknown woman's voice, the abrupt cutoff of the message, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she talked, she realized how implausible it all sounded, a random message on a second-hand phone, a vague plea for help with no details. Rodriguez listened impassively, his face betraying no emotion. When Sarah finished, he pulled out a small notebook and flipped it open. "Mind if I take a look at the phone?" Sarah handed it over, watching anxiously as the detective examined it. His fingers moved over the screen with surprising dexterity, navigating through menus and settings. "There's no message here," he said finally, looking up at her with narrowed eyes. "What? That's impossible. I just heard it." Sarah reached for the phone, but Rodriguez held it just out of reach. "Miss Chun, making false reports is a serious offense. It wastes police resources and could prevent us from helping people in real danger." His voice had taken on a hotter edge, the earlier skepticism transforming into something closer to accusation. Sarah felt her carefully constructed world beginning to tilt. "I'm not making this up," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. The message was there. "I heard it clearly," Rodriguez sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Look, I get it. Sometimes people get lonely. They imagine things. Or maybe you thought this would add some excitement to your life. But trust me, you don't want to go down this road." The implication stung, piercing through Sarah's usual reserve. "I'm an accountant, detective. I deal in facts and figures. I don't imagine things. And I certainly don't make up stories for attention." A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the persistent patter of rain against the windows. Rodriguez studied Sarah intently, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. For her part, Sarah met his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. After what felt like an eternity, Rodriguez's posture softened slightly. "All right, Miss Chun, let's say I believe you heard something. What do you expect me to do with no evidence, no details, not even a name to go on?" The question caught Sarah off guard. In her urgency to report what she'd heard, she hadn't thought beyond the moment. I don't know," she admitted, "but someone out there needs help. We can't just ignore that." Rodriguez handed the phone back to her, his expression unreadable. "Tell you what, if you hear anything else, anything concrete, give me a call." He pulled out a business card and placed it on her coffee table. "But don't go playing detective yourself. Leave the police work to the professionals." As the detective moved towards the door, Sarah felt a surge of frustration. "So that's it? You're just going to leave?" Rodriguez paused, his hand on the doorknob. "What would you have me do, Miss Chun? Chase shadows based on a phantom message? I've got real cases with real victims that need my attention. With that, he left, the door closing behind him with a finality that seemed to echo in Sarah's small apartment. She stood there for a moment, feeling more alone than she had in years. The phone in her hand suddenly felt heavy, a burden she hadn't asked for but couldn't bring herself to put down. Moving to the window, Sarah watched as Rodriguez emerged from the building, hunching against the rain as he made his way to an unmarked car. As he drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just missed something important, that a critical moment had slipped through her fingers. The city outside continued its ceaseless motion, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded in her apartment. Pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, huddled under umbrellas or rushing from awning to awning. Cars inched through traffic, their headlights cutting through the gray haze of the rainy evening. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the rain-streaked glass, her usually composed features now etched with uncertainty. The woman in the distress call had sounded so real, so desperate. How could she simply forget about it and go back to her orderly life? Her gaze fell on the business card Rodriguez had left behind. Despite his dismissive attitude, he had given her a way to contact him. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread, however tenuous, connecting her to the mystery that had invaded her carefully structured world. With a deep breath, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't let this go. Someone out there needed help, and for reasons she didn't fully understand, that plea had reached her. It didn't matter that she was just an accountant, that she had no experience with this sort of thing. She would find a way to uncover the truth. As if in response to her resolve, the phone in her hand buzzed with an incoming message. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat as she looked at the screen. An unknown number. With trembling fingers, she opened the message. A single line of text glowed on the cracked display. "They're watching. Trust no one." Sarah's mind reeled. The game had changed, and she was now irrevocably part of it. As the rain continued to fall outside, she realized that her life would never be the same. The careful arithmetic of her existence had been thrown into chaos, and she had no choice but to embrace the unknown variables that now threatened to overwhelm her. With a mixture of fear and determination, Sarah began to plan her next move. The ordered world she had built for herself was crumbling, but from its ruins, a new purpose was emerging. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew she had to follow it for her own sake, and for the sake of whoever had reached out to her in desperation. The city outside her window suddenly seemed different, larger, more mysterious, filled with hidden dangers and untold stories. Sarah Chen, once content with her quiet life of numbers and routine, found herself standing on the threshold of a world she never knew existed. And despite the fear gnawing at her insides, she felt more alive than she had in years. As the night deepened, Sarah's apartment transformed into a makeshift command center. Her dining table, usually pristine and sparsely used, now groaned under the weight of her laptop, stacks of notepads, and the second-hand phone that had become the epicenter of her world. The soft glow of her computer screen cast eerie shadows across the room, giving familiar objects an air of menace. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning webpage after webpage. She delved into forums discussing missing persons, pored over news articles about human trafficking, and scoured social media for any hint of the mysterious caller. The more she read, the more she realized how vast and terrifying the underworld of human exploitation truly was. A car horn blared outside, startling Sarah from her research-induced trance. She glanced at the clock, 3:27, amazed. The city never truly slept, but at this hour, it took on a different character. The occasional passing headlight swept across her walls, momentarily illuminating the chaotic constellation of sticky notes she'd plastered there, each bearing a scribbled theory or potential lead. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes, feeling the weight of fatigue and the enormity of what she'd undertaken. She was an accountant, not a detective or a social worker. What did she know about saving lives or unraveling criminal conspiracies? The doubts that had been held at bay by her initial determination now crept in, whispering of failure and danger. As if sensing her wavering resolve, the second-hand phone buzzed again. Sarah's heart raced as she reached for it, half expecting another cryptic message. Instead, she found herself staring at a notification for a missed call from earlier in the evening. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it tugged at her memory. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number, holding her breath as it rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. "Hello?" A woman's voice, cautious and slightly hoarse, answered. Sarah's mind raced. She hadn't planned what to say. "Hi, I'm sorry for calling so late. My name is Sarah Chen. I received a missed call from this number, and I was wondering..." "Oh, thank God," the woman interrupted, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've been trying to reach anyone. My name is Olivia Warner. I'm a social worker, and I think I'm in over my head." The fear in Olivia's voice was palpable, mirroring the terror Sarah had heard in the original distress call. "Olivia, what's going on? Are you in danger?" There was a pause, filled only by the sound of Olivia's ragged breathing. When she spoke again, her words came in a rush, as if she feared being cut off at any moment. "I've been working with victims of human trafficking. There's a girl, God, she's just a teenager, who reached out to me. She said she had evidence, names of people involved, big names. But now she's gone missing, and I think I think they know I was helping her. Single quotes. Sarah's mind reeled. This was it. The connection she'd been searching for. Olivia, listen to me carefully. I received a distress call on this phone. It might have been from the girl you're talking about. We need to meet, but not over the phone. It might not be safe. You're right, Olivia agreed, her voice steadier now. There's a 24-hour diner on 4th and Pine. Can you meet me there in an hour? Sarah glanced at the clock again. It was nearing 4 a.m., but she knew sleep was out of the question now. I'll be there. Stay safe, Olivia. As she ended the call, Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. She was no longer alone in this, but the stakes had suddenly become very real. Lives were on the line, not just the missing girls, but possibly Olivia's and her own as well. Sarah moved quickly, changing into jeans and a nondescript hoodie. She grabbed her pepper spray from her bedside drawer, a purchase she'd made years ago but never thought she'd need. As she headed for the door, her gaze fell on Detective Rodriguez's business card. After a moment's hesitation, she pocketed it. She wasn't ready to involve him yet, but it was good to have a lifeline, however tenuous. The streets of Seattle were eerily quiet as Sarah made her way to the diner. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a mist that clung to the streetlights, giving them halos of diffused light. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every passing car a possible tale. Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, her heart pounding with each unexpected sound. The diner's neon sign cut through the pre-dawn gloom, a beacon of normalcy in a night that had become anything but. Sarah pushed open the door, the bell's cheerful jingle at odds with her frayed nerves. Her eyes scanned the nearly empty restaurant, finally settling on a woman sitting alone in a corner booth. Olivia Warner looked up as Sarah approached, her haunted eyes brightening with recognition. She was older than Sarah had expected, probably in her late 40s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and lines of worry etched deeply around her mouth. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, sliding into the booth across from her. "Olivia, it's good to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." A tired waitress approached, pouring coffee for both of them without asking. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for its comforting heat. "Tell me everything," Sarah said once the waitress had moved away. From the beginning, Olivia took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with a paper napkin. "It started about 3 months ago. A girl came into our outreach center. Lily, she called herself. Probably not her real name. She was scared, said she'd escaped from some kind of sex trafficking ring. We see cases like this more often than you'd think, but there was something different about Lily. She wasn't just running. She was fighting back." Sarah leaned in, captivated by Olivia's words. The social worker's voice grew stronger as she continued, as if sharing her story was lifting a weight from her shoulders. Lily had names, dates, locations. She'd been keeping track, planning her escape for months. But it wasn't just about her. She wanted to bring the whole operation down, save the other girls. I tried to convince her to go to the police, but she was adamant. She didn't trust them, said there were cops involved. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. If what Lily said was true, it explained why her initial report had been dismissed so easily. What happened next? She prompted. Olivia's face fell. I made a mistake. I thought I could handle it, thought I could protect her. I started digging, using my contacts, trying to verify Lily's information. But I was clumsy. Someone must have noticed. 2 weeks ago, Lily disappeared. No trace, just gone. And then I started noticing things. Cars parked outside my house. Strange calls in the middle of the night. I'm scared, Sarah. I'm scared for Lily, and I'm scared for myself. Sarah reached across the table, taking Olivia's trembling hands in her own. You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together. As if on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, her breath catching as she read the new message. The girl is alive, 48 hours. Pier 91, come alone or she dies. Sarah showed the message to Olivia, whose face drained of color. Oh God, Olivia whispered. What have we gotten ourselves into? The diner's fluorescent lights flickered, casting momentary shadows across their faces. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. but Sarah felt as if she was standing on the edge of a deepening abyss. She had wanted answers, and now she had them, along with a ticking clock and a threat that chilled her to her core. "We need help," Sarah said, her mind racing. "Professional help. I know a detective." Olivia's grip on Sarah's hands tightened painfully. "No, didn't you hear what I said? We can't trust the police. If we involve them, we're signing Lily's death warrant." Sarah wanted to argue, to insist that surely not all cops could be corrupt, that Detective Rodriguez had seemed genuinely concerned, even if skeptical. But the fear in Olivia's eyes stopped her. This woman had been working in the trenches, had seen firsthand the depths of human cruelty and the far-reaching tentacles of corruption. If she said they couldn't trust the police, Sarah had to believe her. "Okay," Sarah said, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "No police, but we can't do this alone. We need resources, information. Someone who can move in circles we can't." Olivia nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I might know someone. A hacker. He goes by Ghost. He's helped us track down missing kids before. If anyone can navigate the digital underworld, it's him." Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. A hacker could be exactly what they needed. Someone who could access information without raising alarms, who could help them understand the scope of what they were dealing with. "Can you contact him?" Sarah asked. Olivia nodded. "I'll reach out." "But Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. These people, they're dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt us, or worse." Sarah looked down at her hands, still entwined with Olivia's on the table. She thought about her orderly life, her safe job, the careful boundaries she'd built around herself. Then she thought about the terror in that first distress call, about Lily and all the other nameless, faceless victims out there. She thought about the person she'd always wanted to be, someone brave, someone who made a difference. "I'm sure," Sarah said, meeting Olivia's gaze with newfound determination. "Whatever it takes, we're gonna save Lily and bring these bastards down." As they left the diner, the city was beginning to wake up. The streets were filling with early morning commuters, the air thick with the smell of coffee and the sound of buses and trains. Sarah and Olivia walked side by side, two ordinary women now burdened with an extraordinary mission. They had 47 hours to save a life and unravel a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. The odds were stacked against them, the dangers immense. But as the sun rose over Seattle, casting long shadows across the awakening city, Sarah felt a fierce resolve burning within her. She had stumbled into this fight by chance, but she would see it through by choice. The game was on, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The next 48 hours unfolded in a blur of frenetic activity. Sarah's apartment, once a testament to minimalist living, now resembled a war room. Maps of Seattle covered her walls, red strings connecting potential locations and suspects. Her dining table disappeared beneath a sea of printouts, financial records, shipping manifests, and grainy surveillance photos. At the center of this organized chaos sat James Thompson, known in hacker circles as Ghost. He was younger than Sarah had expected, barely out of his 20s, with thick-rimmed glasses and a perpetual energy that manifested in constant finger-tapping and knee-bouncing. His laptop, a custom-built machine that hummed with quiet power, was his weapon of choice in this digital battleground. "You're sure this connection is secure?" Sarah asked for what felt like the 100th time, peering over James's shoulder at the scrolling lines of code on his screen. James shot her a look that was equal parts amusement and exasperation. "Relax, Sarah. I've got more encryption on this thing than the Pentagon. Nobody's listening in unless they've got tech from the future." Olivia, who had been pacing the length of the small living room, paused to study one of the maps. "Any luck tracing that message about Pier 91? James shook his head, his fingers never stopping their dance across the keyboard. "Whoever sent it knows their stuff. The signal bounced through half a dozen countries before it hit your phone. But I'm running some algorithms that might give us a lead." Sarah felt a mixture of awe and frustration watching James work. In the space of a day, he had accessed shipping schedules, hacked into traffic camera feeds around the pier, and even managed to pull financial records for several shell companies. they suspected were tied to the trafficking ring. It was impressive, but so far, they were no closer to finding Lily or understanding the full scope of what they were up against. The burner phone Sarah had purchased earlier that day, a precaution James had insisted on, buzzed on the coffee table. All three of them froze, staring at it as if it might explode. "It's a text," James said, reaching for it first. His eyes widened as he read the message aloud. "Final warning. Pier 91, midnight. The girl dies at dawn." Sarah felt her stomach lurch. They had less than 6 hours left. "We need to move now," she said, already reaching for her jacket. Olivia grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait, we can't just rush in there blind. We need a plan." "Olivia's right," James chimed in, his usual nervous energy replaced by a focused intensity. "I've been monitoring chatter on some dark web forums. There's definitely something big going down at the pier tonight, but it's not just a simple exchange. This feels like a trap." Sarah sank onto the couch, her mind racing. "So, what do? We can't just let Lily die." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft whir of James's laptop fan. It was Olivia who finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "We go in, but not alone and not unprepared." Over the next few hours, a plan took shape. James would stay behind, coordinating their movements and monitoring security feeds. Sarah and Olivia would approach the pier from different directions, each equipped with a hidden camera and earpiece that James had jury-rigged from spare parts and sheer ingenuity. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sarah found herself in her bedroom, changing into dark clothes that would help her blend into the shadows. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the cautious accountant who measured her life in spreadsheets and careful decisions. In her place stood someone harder, more determined, someone willing to risk everything for a stranger. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Olivia entered, her own face a mask of grim determination. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Olivia crossed the room and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Whatever happens tonight," Olivia whispered, "I want you to know that you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. Lily's lucky to have you fighting for her." As they broke apart, Sarah felt a lump in her throat. In the span of 2 days, these people, Olivia, James, and the unseen Lily, had become more important to her than anyone had in years. The thought of losing any of them was unbearable. The drive to Pier 91 was tense, the city lights blurring past as Sarah navigated the late-night traffic. In her ear, James's voice provided a steady stream of updates. "Security cameras on the east side of the pier just went dark," he reported. "Definitely our guys." "Olivia, you're clear to move in from the west." "Sarah, hold your position until I give the signal." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she pulled into a shadowy parking spot with a clear view of the pier's main entrance. Her heart pounded in her chest, every sense hyper-alert. The waterfront was eerily quiet at this hour, the usual bustle of maritime commerce replaced by an oppressive silence. Movement at the north end. James's voice crackled. 2 SUVs just pulled up. Heavy tint, no plates. Sarah watched as a group of men emerged from the vehicles, their movements purposeful and synchronized. Even from a distance, she could see the telltale bulges of concealed weapons beneath their jackets. "Olivia, do you have eyes on the targets?" James asked. There was a moment of static, then Olivia's whispered reply. "Affirmative. I count 6 men, heavily armed." No sign of Lily yet. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was real. There was no turning back now. "Sarah, it's time," James said. "Move in, but stay in the shadows. Remember, your primary goal is to locate Lily. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." With trembling hands, Sarah opened her car door and slipped out into the night. The cool air off the water helped clear her head as she made her way towards the pier, sticking to the deepest patches of darkness. As she drew closer, she could hear muffled voices, men arguing in hushed, urgent tones. She crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, straining to make out the words. "Told you, this was a mistake," one voice hissed. "We should have eliminated the problem, not tried to negotiate." "Shut up," Another voice growled. The boss wants the girl alive. Our job is to make the exchange and get out. Nothing more. Sarah's heart raced. They were talking about Lily. She was alive, at least for now. But where was she? A sudden commotion from the other side of the pier caught her attention. Shouts of alarm, followed by the unmistakable sound of a scuffle. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Olivia had been spotted. "Abort!" James's panicked voice filled her ear. "Sarah, get out of there now." But Sarah couldn't move. Not when they were so close. Not when Olivia might need her help. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, Sarah darted from her hiding place, keeping low as she moved towards the source of the disturbance. As she rounded a corner, she froze at the sight before her. Olivia was on her knees, surrounded by armed men. One of them held a gun to her head, his face twisted in a snarl of rage. And there, being dragged from the back of one of the SUVs, was a young girl. Lily, it had to be, her eyes wide with terror. Time seemed to slow down as Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could run, try to save herself. She could call for help, but who would come? The police. After everything they'd learned about the corruption within the force, could they be trusted? In that moment, Sarah Chum made a decision that would change her life forever. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the shadows and into the harsh glare of the pier's floodlights. "Let them go," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm the one you want." All eyes turned to her, a mixture of surprise and suspicion on the faces of her adversaries. The man holding the gun to Olivia's head grinned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Well, he said. "Looks like we caught ourselves a real hero." As the armed man began to move towards her, Sarah's mind flashed to the life she'd left behind, the safety of numbers, the predictability of her daily routine. But as she met Olivia's eyes, saw the mixture of fear and gratitude there, she knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, whatever price she had to pay, Sarah knew that this moment, this stand against injustice and cruelty, was what her life had been building towards. In the face of evil, she had chosen to fight, and in that choice, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The night was far from over, and the danger was only beginning. But as Sarah raised her hands in surrender, a strange calm settled over her. She had stepped into the unknown, driven by compassion and a thirst for justice. Now, all that remained was to see this fight through to its bitter end. The tension on the pier was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse in the cool night air. Sarah stood motionless, her hands raised, as the armed men closed in around her. In her ear, James's voice had become a frantic stream of curses and pleas for her to run. "Shut it off," Sarah muttered, reaching up to remove her earpiece before the men could discover it. The last thing she heard was James shouting her name before the device went silent in her palm. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, stepped forward. His eyes, cold and calculating, raked over Sarah with predatory intensity. "Search her," he barked to one of his men. Rough hands patted Sarah down, confiscating her phone and the now silent earpiece. She winced as the man's fingers dug into her sides, but she kept her gaze locked on Olivia and Lily. Olivia's face was a mask of anguish, silently begging Sarah to save herself. Lily, barely more than a child, trembled in the grip of her captor, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "She's clean," the man searching Sarah reported. "Just these." He held up the confiscated items. The scarred leader took the earpiece, turning it over in his hands with a frown. "You're not working alone," he said, his voice a low growl. "Who else is out there?" Sarah's mind raced. She needed to keep their attention on her, away from Olivia and Lily. "No one else," she lied. "I'm here to make a deal. Me for the girl and the social worker. Let them go, and I'll tell you everything I know." A harsh laugh erupted from the leader. "You're in no position to make deals, sweetheart, but I admire your spirit." He turned to his men. "Bring them all. The boss will want to chat with our little hero here." As two of the men grabbed Sarah's arms, a commotion erupted from the far end of the pier. Shouts and the sound of running feet echoed across the water. The leader cursed, barking orders to his team. "Move! Now! Get them in the cars!" In the chaos that followed, Sarah locked eyes with Olivia. A silent message passed between them. A plan formed in desperation. As one of the men reached for Lily, Olivia suddenly lurched forward, throwing her full weight against him. The man stumbled, his grip on Lily loosening just enough. "Run!" Olivia screamed. Lily didn't hesitate. She tore free from her captor's grasp and sprinted towards the edge of the pier. Two of the men gave chase, but the girl was fueled by terror and adrenaline. She reached the water's edge and, without breaking stride, dove into the inky blackness of Puget Sound. "No!" the leader roared. He raised his gun, aiming at the ripples where Lily had disappeared. Sarah acted on pure instinct. She threw herself at the leader, knocking his arm aside just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, the sound echoing across the water. In the distance, more shouts could be heard, along with the wail of approaching sirens. The leader backhanded Sarah, sending her sprawling onto the rough concrete of the pier. Stars exploded behind her eyes, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the leader barking orders. "Forget the girl. We need to move. Bring these two, now." Rough hands grabbed Sarah, hauling her to her feet. She saw Olivia being manhandled into one of the SUVs, struggling every step of the way. As Sarah was shoved into the same vehicle, she caught a glimpse of the water. There was no sign of Lily. She sent up a silent prayer that the girl had made it to safety. The doors slammed shut, and the SUV peeled away from the pier, tires squealing. Sarah found herself crushed between Olivia and one of their captors, the vehicle's interior thick with the smell of leather and fear. "Are you okay?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine's roar. Sarah nodded, wincing at the pain in her jaw. "Lily?" she asked. "I don't know," Olivia replied, her eyes brimming with tears. "God, I hope she made it." "Shut up." The man next to them snarled, emphasizing his point with a rough shake of Sarah's arm. As the SUV sped through the streets of Seattle, Sarah's mind raced. The pier had clearly been a setup, but not the one they'd expected. Someone else had been closing in? The police? A rival gang? And what about James? Had he managed to alert the authorities, or was he still frantically trying to track them from her apartment? The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, offering no clue as to their destination. Sarah tried to memorize turns, to create a mental map, but it was useless. After what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, the SUV finally slowed, turning into what appeared to be an underground parking garage. As they were roughly pulled from the vehicle, Sarah got her first good look at their new prison. It was a nondescript office building, the kind that housed countless tech startups and corporate branch offices. Nothing about its facade suggested it was the lair of a human trafficking ring. They were marched through sterile hallways, passing empty cubicles and darkened conference rooms. The juxtaposition of mundane office life with their dire situation was jarring. Finally, they were shoved into a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. A man stood silhouetted against the city lights, his back to them as they entered. He was tall and well-built, his expensive suit speaking of wealth and power. When he turned, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She recognized him immediately from news reports and charity gala photos. Viktor Volkov, Russian expatriate and one of Seattle's most prominent businessmen and philanthropists. Volkov's piercing blue eyes swept over them, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "So," he said, his accent adding a sinister edge to the word, "these are the little mice who've been scurrying around my operation." His gaze settled on Sarah. "And you must be the ringleader. I must say, I'm impressed. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble these past few days." Sarah straightened, meeting Volkov's stare with as much defiance as she could muster. "We know what you're doing," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The trafficking, the corruption, it's over, Volkov. Even if you kill us, others know. You can't hide anymore." Volkov's laugh was cold and utterly without humor. "My dear, you have no idea of the forces you're dealing with. This," he gestured expansively, "this is so much bigger than you can imagine. Your noble little crusade was doomed from the start." He moved to his desk, pressing a button on an intercom. bring in our other guest," he ordered. Moments later, the office door opened. Sarah turned, expecting to see another of Volkov's thugs. Instead, her heart dropped as Detective Michael Rodriguez was let in, his hands cuffed behind his back, his face a mask of resignation and shame. "Detective," Volkov said, his tone mockingly cordial, "so good of you to join us. I believe you've already met Miss Chun and Miss Warner? Why don't you explain to them how this little game of ours really works?" Rodriguez couldn't meet their eyes. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't have a choice. They have my family." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The one person she thought might be able to help them was compromised, a puppet of the very organization they were fighting against. Volkov clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the tense silence of the office. "Now then, let's discuss your options. Miss Chun, Miss Warner, you've stumbled into a world you don't understand, but I'm not an unreasonable man. There's a place for people with your determination in my organization. Join us, and I promise you wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Refuse, and well," his smile turned predatory, "I'm sure we can find a market for two intelligent, attractive women." The implication turned Sarah's stomach. She glanced at Olivia, saw the same mix of revulsion and fear on her face. But beneath that, Sarah also saw a flicker of something else: determination and a silent communication. Whatever happened, they were in this together. Sarah turned back to Volkov, her decision made. "We'll never join you," she spat. "And you're wrong about one thing. We understand exactly what kind of monster you are." Volkov's eyes hardened, all pretense of civility vanishing. "Very well," he snarled. "You've made your choice." He nodded to one of his men. "Take them to the holding cells. We'll let them consider their options for a while. Perhaps a taste of what awaits them will change their minds." As they were dragged from the office, Sarah caught one last glimpse of the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Lily was hopefully safe. James was still free, still fighting. And down on the streets, oblivious to the evil in their midst, millions of people went about their lives. Sarah had always considered herself ordinary, unremarkable. But in this moment, being led to an uncertain fate, she realized that ordinary people were the ones who changed the world. With that thought burning in her heart, she squared her shoulders and prepared herself for whatever came next. The night was far from over, and Sarah Chun was far from defeated. The holding cells were a stark contrast to the polished opulence of Volkov's office. Sarah and Olivia were roughly shoved into a small, windowless room with bare concrete walls and a single flickering fluorescent light. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind them, the sound of multiple locks engaging echoing in the confined space. Sarah immediately began to examine their prison, running her hands along the walls, searching for any weakness or potential escape route. Olivia slumped against the far wall, her face a mask of exhaustion and despair. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "This is all my fault. I should never have dragged you into this." Sarah paused in her examination of the cell, turning to face her companion. "Hey, no, don't do that. I made my own choices. We're in this together, remember?" Olivia managed a weak smile, but her eyes remained haunted. "What do you think they'll do to us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken horrors. Sarah swallowed hard, forcing down her own fear. "We can't think about that right now. We need to focus on getting out of here." As if on cue, a series of muffled thuds and shouts echoed from somewhere beyond their cell. Sarah and Olivia exchanged glances, hope and trepidation warring in their expressions. The commotion grew louder, punctuated by what sounded like gunfire. Suddenly, the locks on their cell door began to disengage. Sarah positioned herself in front of Olivia, ready to face whatever came through that door. As it swung open, she tensed, prepared to fight. "Sarah? Olivia?" "Thank God." James burst into the cell, his face flushed with exertion, a tablet clutched in one hand and what looked like a homemade taser in the other. Behind him stood a tall, athletic woman with close-cropped hair and a determined expression. She held a very real, very lethal-looking assault rifle. "James?" Sarah gasped, relief flooding through her. "How did you—" "No time to explain." James cut her off, already turning back to the hallway. "We need to move." Now, the woman with the rifle nodded sharply. "I'll take point. You three stay close and do exactly as I say. Clear?" As they hurried from the cell, Sarah's mind reeled. "Who are you?" she asked the woman. "Agent Cassandra Reeves, FBI," came the terse reply. "Your friend here," she nodded towards James, "managed to get some very interesting information to us. We've been trying to build a case against Volkov for years." They moved swiftly through dimly lit corridors, stepping over the unconscious forms of Volkov's men. Sarah's heart raced, every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat. She couldn't quite believe this was happening. It felt like a scene from an action movie, not something that could occur in real life. "Wait," Olivia said suddenly, pulling up short. "What about Detective Rodriguez? He's being held here too. We can't just leave him." Agent Reeves' expression hardened. "Rodriguez is compromised. He's been on our radar for months. Right now, our priority is getting you two to safety." A pang of sympathy for the detective flashed through Sarah. Despite his betrayal, she couldn't forget the anguish in his eyes when he spoke of his family. But there was no time to dwell on it. They were already moving again, Reeves leading them towards what she said was a service exit. Just as they reached a final set of doors, an alarm began to blare. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. "They've realized you're gone," Reeves growled. "Double time, people." They burst through the doors into a back alley, the cool night air a shock after the stifling confines of their cell. A nondescript van idled nearby, its side door already sliding open. "In, now," Reeves barked, laying down cover fire as shapes appeared at the building's windows above them. Sarah practically dove into the van, pulling Olivia in after her. James scrambled in last, slamming the door shut as the vehicle peeled away from the curb with a screech of tires. As they sped through the pre-dawn streets of Seattle, the adrenaline that had been keeping Sarah going began to ebb. The events of the past few days crashed over her in a wave of exhaustion and delayed terror. She found herself shaking uncontrollably, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Olivia wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "It's okay," she murmured. "We're safe now. You did it, Sarah. You saved us." Sarah wanted to protest that it was James and Agent Reeves who had saved them, that she had done nothing but get them captured in the first place. But she was too tired to argue. Instead, she leaned into Olivia's embrace, drawing comfort from the other woman's warmth. James, who had been furiously typing on his tablet, looked up with a grin. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "While I was in Volkov's systems, I managed to download terabytes of data. Financial records, shipping manifestos, client lists, everything. We've got enough evidence here to bring down not just Volkov, but half the corrupt officials in the state." Agent Reeves, who was on the phone in the front seat, turned to them with a rare smile. "Good work, all of you. We're taking you to a safe house now. You'll be debriefed there, and we'll discuss protective custody options." The word custody sent a chill through Sarah. She suddenly realized that her old life, her job, her apartment, everything she had known was gone. There was no going back from this. As if reading her thoughts, Olivia squeezed her hand. "It's going to be okay," she said softly. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As the van wound its way through the awakening city, she found her thoughts drifting to Lily. Had the girl made it to safety? Would they ever know what happened to her? Almost in answer to her unspoken question, James's tablet pinged. He read the incoming message, his eyes widening. "Guys," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "you're not going to believe this. Lily, she made it. She swam to a nearby dock and was found by a night security guard. She's in protective custody now, safe and sound." A sob of relief escaped Sarah's throat. Olivia pulled her closer, her own eyes brimming with tears of joy. Even Agent Reeves looked moved by the news. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, Sarah felt a profound sense of change settling over her. The world she was entering now was fraught with danger, filled with shadows and secrets she was only beginning to understand. But it was also a world where ordinary people could make a difference, where courage and compassion could triumph over greed and cruelty. Sarah Chen, once a cautious accountant who measured her life in careful increments, had become something else entirely. She had faced her fears, risked everything for strangers, and emerged stronger for it. As the safe house came into view, a modest suburban home that would be their sanctuary for the foreseeable future, Sarah realized that she was, for the first time in years, truly alive. The van came to a stop, and Agent Reeves turned to address them one last time before they disembarked. "I know the past few days have been hell for you," she said, her tone softer than before. "But what you've done, you've saved lives. You've given us the tools to save many more. Whatever happens next, remember that. You're heroes, every one of you." As they stepped out into the cool morning air, Sarah took a deep breath. The future was uncertain, filled with debriefings and protective custody, and the looming specter of Volkov's vast network. But as she looked at James and Olivia, her newfound family forged in the crucible of the past 48 hours, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. The safe house was a study in contradictions. From the outside, it was the picture of suburban normalcy. A modest two-story home with a well-manicured lawn and cheerful flower boxes beneath the windows. Inside, however, it was a hive of activity, filled with FBI agents, computer specialists, and a constant hum of urgent conversations. Sarah, Olivia, and James were ushered into what had once been a cozy living room, now transformed into a makeshift command center. Laptops and monitors covered every available surface, their screens flickering with streams of data and surveillance footage. Agent Reeves guided them to a small cluster of chairs in the corner, relatively isolated from the bustle around them. "Get comfortable," she said, her tone businesslike but not unkind. "We've got a lot to go over, and it's going to take time." As they settled in, a gentle-faced woman in her 50s approached, carrying a tray laden with sandwiches and bottles of water. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the tray down on a nearby table. "I'm Dr. Elena Rossi, the Bureau's trauma counselor. I'll be here if any of you need to talk." Sarah nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. When was the last time she'd eaten? It felt like weeks ago. As they ate, Agent Reeves began the debriefing. "I need you to walk me through everything from the beginning. Every detail, no matter how small, could be important." For the next several hours, Sarah, Olivia, and James recounted their harrowing experience. They described the initial phone call, their investigation, the confrontation at the pier, and their captivity in Volkov's headquarters. Dr. Rossi remained a calm, supportive presence throughout, offering quiet words of encouragement when the memories became too intense. As they spoke, Sarah couldn't help but notice the growing look of concern on Agent Reeves' face. When they finished, the FBI agent leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. "What you've uncovered," she said slowly, "goes far beyond what we initially suspected. Volkov isn't just running a local trafficking ring. He's a key player in a global network, with ties to some of the most powerful people in the world." The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. James was the first to break the silence. "So what happens now?" he asked, his earlier bravado replaced by a weariness that seemed to age him beyond his years. Agent Reeves sighed, running a hand through her short-cropped hair. "Now, we build a case. The information you've provided gives us a solid foundation, but we need more. Concrete evidence, witnesses willing to testify." She paused, her gaze moving between the three of them. "And that's where you come in." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "We need you to testify," Reeves said bluntly. "Your first-hand accounts, combined with the data James extracted, could be the key to bringing down not just Volkov, but the entire network." Olivia leaned forward, her face pale but determined. "Of course we'll testify. After what we've seen, what we've been through, we have to." James nodded in agreement, but Sarah remained silent, her mind racing. The thought of facing Volkov in court, of reliving the terror of the past few days in front of a jury, made her stomach churn. Dr. Rossi seemed to sense her distress. "It's okay to be afraid," she said gently. "What you've been through is traumatic. No one would blame you for wanting to walk away." Sarah looked up, meeting the counselor's kind eyes. "But if we don't do this," she said slowly, "if we don't stand up and tell the truth, how many more people will suffer?" Agent Reeves nodded approvingly. I won't lie to you. This won't be easy. You'll be under protective custody for the foreseeable future. Your old lives, as you knew them, are over. But what you're doing, it's important. It matters. As the weight of the decision settled over them, a commotion near the front of the house drew their attention. Moments later, a young girl was escorted into the room, her eyes wide and searching. Lily, Olivia gasped, rising to her feet. The girl's face lit up with recognition. She rushed forward, throwing herself into Olivia's arms. You're okay, Lily sobbed, her words muffled against Olivia's shoulder. I was so scared. I thought they'd killed you. Sarah watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and a strange sense of longing. This was why they had fought so hard, risked so much. This one life, saved from a nightmare. As Lily's sobs subsided, she pulled back, her gaze falling on Sarah. You're the one from the pier, she said softly. You saved me. Sarah shook her head, feeling unworthy of the girl's gratitude. We all saved each other, she said. Agent Reeves cleared her throat, drawing their attention back to the matter at hand. Lily's testimony will be crucial, she said, but it also means she'll need the highest level of protection. The people we're dealing with, they'll stop at nothing to keep her quiet. The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They were no longer just witnesses or accidental heroes. They were now key players in a battle against a vast, shadowy network of evil. As the day wore on, more details of their new lives under witness protection were hammered out. New identities would be created. They would be moved to a secure location, possibly out of state. Their families would be told they had died in an accident, a necessary cruelty to ensure their safety. Throughout it all, Sarah found herself watching her companions. James, his earlier bravado tempered by the reality of their situation, pored over documents with FBI cyber experts, his expertise proving invaluable. Olivia sat with Lily, their heads bent close together, offering each other the comfort of shared experience. And through it all, Dr. Rossi remained a steady presence, always ready with a kind word or supportive touch. As night fell, the activity in the safe house began to wind down. Agent Reeves approached their group one last time. Try to get some rest, she said. Tomorrow, we start your new lives. Sarah nodded, exhaustion suddenly hitting her like a physical force. As she was led to a small bedroom upstairs, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a hallway mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, eyes haunted, jaw set with determination, bearing little resemblance to the cautious accountant of just days ago. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by the quiet hum of surveillance equipment and the muffled voices of FBI agents, Sarah found sleep elusive. Her mind raced with the events of the past few days, with the enormity of what lay ahead. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. Olivia poked her head in, her expression a mix of exhaustion and concern. Can't sleep either? She asked. Sarah shook her head, scooting over to make room. Olivia settled beside her on the narrow bed, their shoulders touching. For a long moment, they sat in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Olivia spoke. Are you scared? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah considered the question. Was she scared? Yes, of course. The thought of facing Volkov in court, of living a life looking over her shoulder, was terrifying. But there was something else too, something that burned beneath the fear. I'm terrified, Sarah admitted, but I'm also, I don't know, determined? For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that really matters. Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. I know what you mean. All those years working as a social worker, I thought I was making a difference. But this is bigger than anything I could have imagined. As they talked, Sarah felt some of the tension begin to leave her body. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. She had Olivia, James, even young Lily, a makeshift family forged in the crucible of shared danger and common purpose. When Olivia finally left to return to her own room, Sarah found sleep came easy. Her dreams were a jumble of courtrooms and dark alleys, of Volkov's cold eyes and Lily's grateful smile. But through it all, a sense of purpose remained, a beacon guiding her through the storm. As dawn broke, painting the safe house in soft hues of pink and gold. Sarah Chun rose to face her new life. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and the weight of responsibility. But as she joined the others downstairs, saw the determination in their eyes that matched her own, she knew that together they could face whatever came next. The battle against Volkov and his network was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly alive, truly part of something greater than herself. And that, she realized, was worth any price. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the safe house's well-manicured lawn, the atmosphere inside shifted from one of stunned relief to focused determination. Agent Reeves gathered Sarah, Olivia, James, and Lily in the makeshift command center, her face etched with lines of fatigue but her eyes sharp and alert. "We've got a lot to cover," she began, spreading a series of documents across the table. "Your new identities, relocation plans, and most importantly, how we're going to build this case against Volkov and his network." Sarah leaned forward, studying the papers before her. A new driver's license stared back at her, bearing her photo but a stranger's name, Emily Taylor. The address listed was for a small town in Oregon she'd never even heard of. "Emily Taylor," she murmured, testing the name on her tongue. It felt foreign, ill-fitting, like a coat meant for someone else. Olivia picked up her own new identity, Rachel Foster, a high school counselor from Idaho. James was now David Chen, a freelance IT consultant. And Lily, her young face serious beyond her years, became Sophie Williams, a high school sophomore. "Memorize everything," Agent Reeves instructed. "Your backgrounds, your family histories, every detail. From this moment on, these are your lives." As they pored over their new identities, Dr. Rossi entered the room, her gentle presence a balm to their frayed nerves. "I know this is overwhelming," she said, taking a seat at the table. "It's okay to feel lost, even scared. This is a huge transition." James looked up from his papers, his usual confidence wavering. "How do we do this?" he asked. "Just become different people?" Dr. Rossi smiled softly. "You don't become different people. You're still yourselves at your core. Think of these new identities as roles you're playing, important roles that will keep you safe and help bring justice." Sarah nodded, trying to internalize the counselor's words. She wasn't erasing Sarah Chun. She was simply adding Emily Taylor to her repertoire. The thought helped, if only a little. Agent Reeves cleared her throat, drawing their attention back to the matter at hand. Now, about building the case. "The data James extracted is invaluable, but we need more. Witness testimony, paper trails, anything that can corroborate what we already know." She turned to Lily, her voice softening. "Lily, I know this is difficult, but your testimony will be crucial. Can you walk us through your experience from the beginning?" The room fell silent as Lily began to speak. Her voice, small at first, grew stronger as she recounted her harrowing ordeal, how she'd been lured with promises of modeling jobs, the gradual isolation from her family, and finally, the horrifying realization of what was really happening. As Lily spoke, Sarah found herself reaching for Olivia's hand under the table. The social worker's fingers intertwined with hers, offering silent support. James, his face pale, typed furiously on a laptop, correlating Lily's account with the data he'd stolen. When Lily finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Agent Reeves cleared her throat, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Thank you, Lily. Your bravery will help save countless others, Doctor." Rossi moved to sit beside Lily, offering quiet words of comfort and support. Sarah marveled at the girl's strength, feeling a fierce protectiveness well up inside her. "What about Detective Rodriguez?" Sarah asked suddenly, remembering the conflicted officer. He seemed trapped, coerced. Could he be convinced to testify? Agent Reeves' expression darkened. "Rodriguez is complicated. We're working on extracting his family, but he's in deep, very deep. If we can turn him, it would be a major break in the case. But it's risky." The day wore on, a blur of strategy sessions, psychological evaluations, and crash courses in their new lives. By evening, Sarah's head was spinning with information, bank account numbers, backstories, emergency protocols. As they broke for dinner, a simple meal of takeout eaten in shifts to maintain security, Sarah found herself gravitating towards the safe house's back porch. The evening air was cool against her skin, a welcome respite from the intensity inside. She wasn't alone for long. James joined her, leaning against the railing with a heavy sigh. "Hell of a week, huh?" he said, a ghost of his old smirk playing at his lips. Sarah couldn't help but chuckle. That's one way of putting it. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Finally, James spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Do you ever wonder if we just walked away that first night, ignored the message, where we'd be now?" Sarah considered the question. She thought about her old life, the tidy apartment, the predictable job, the careful routines. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Safe," she said finally. "We'd be safe and comfortable and oblivious," James finished for her. "We'd never have known about Lily, about all the others like her. Single quotes." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of their newfound knowledge settling on her shoulders. "I don't regret it," she said firmly. "Not for a second." James smiled, a genuine warmth replacing his usual cocky grin. "Me neither." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by Olivia, who poked her head through the porch door. "Hey, you two. Agent Reeves wants us back inside. Something about finalizing transport plans." As they made their way back to the command center, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it was tempered now by purpose, by the knowledge that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Agent Reeves was hunched over a map when they entered, her finger tracing routes across state lines. She looked up as they approached, her expression grim but determined. "We move tomorrow night," she announced. "Separate vehicles, separate routes. You'll each have a security detail, but it's crucial that you maintain your covers at all times." The reality of their situation hit Sarah anew. This was really happening. In less than 24 hours, Sarah Chan would cease to exist, replaced by Emily Taylor. As if sensing her turmoil, Dr. Rossi appeared at her side. "Remember," she said softly, "you're not losing yourself. You're evolving, adapting. The core of who you are, your courage, your compassion, that doesn't change." Sarah nodded, grateful for the counselor's steady presence. She looked around the room, at the faces that had become so dear to her in such a short time. Olivia, her quiet strength, a constant source of support. James, his bravado masking a heart of gold. Lily, so young, yet so resilient. And even Agent Reeves, whose gruff exterior belied a fierce protectiveness. They were more than witnesses now, more than accidental heroes. They were a team, bound by shared experience and a common goal. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the night deepened and final preparations were made, Sarah found herself drawn once more to the window. The street outside was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past few days. Somewhere out there, Volkov and his network continued their evil work, but not for much longer. Not if they had anything to say about it. Sarah Chun, soon to be Emily Taylor, took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and the weight of responsibility. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive, truly part of something greater than herself. As she turned back to join the others, a quote she'd once read floated through her mind. "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Well, they had chosen to do something, and come what may, they would see it through to the end. The dawn of a new day and a new life was just hours away. Sarah was ready to meet it head-on. The night before their departure was a somber affair. Despite Dr. Rossi's best efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy, an undercurrent of tension ran through the safe house. Sarah found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. As the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, she made her way downstairs, drawn by the smell of coffee and the low murmur of voices. In the kitchen, she found Olivia and James already awake, huddled around a small table with steaming mugs in hand. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" James asked, pushing a fresh cup of coffee towards her. Sarah shook her head, gratefully accepting the offered drink. It feels, I don't know, like the calm before the storm. Olivia nodded in understanding. I keep thinking about my family, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My parents, my sister. They'll think I'm dead. I can't even imagine what that's going to do to them. The weight of Olivia's words settled heavily over the kitchen. It was a reality they'd all been grappling with, the necessary cruelty of their disappearance, the pain it would cause those they left behind. Maybe, James began, then hesitated. Maybe after this is all over, when Volkov's behind bars and it's safe, maybe we can find a way to let them know we're okay. It was a hope they all clung to, however faint. The idea that someday, somehow, they might be able to reclaim pieces of their old lives. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Reeves, her face etched with lines of fatigue, but her eyes alert and focused. Good, you're up, she said briskly. We need to go over the final details of the transport plan. As they gathered in the living room, joined shortly by a bleary-eyed Lily and a concerned doctor, Rossi, Agent Reeves spread out a series of maps on the coffee table. You'll be traveling in 3 separate vehicles, she explained, tracing routes with her finger. Sarah and Lily will be in the first car, heading north before cutting east. Olivia, you'll be in the second vehicle, taking a more southern route. James, you're in the third, going straight east before heading north. Sarah felt a pang at the thought of being separated from Olivia and James, but she understood the necessity. Splitting up reduced the risk of all of them being caught if something went wrong. Each car will have a 2-person security detail, Agent Reeves continued. You'll make minimal stops, and when you do, you stick to your cover stories. No deviation, no matter what. Understood? They all nodded, the gravity of the situation reflected in their solemn expressions. As the morning progressed, final preparations were made. Bags were packed with clothes fitting their new identities. Cell phones were exchanged for secure, untraceable devices. Last-minute briefings were given on everything from emergency protocols to the quirks of their new hometowns. Throughout it all, Sarah found herself watching her companions, memorizing their faces, their mannerisms. She didn't know when or if they would all be together again like this. As the appointed hour drew near, Dior Rossi gathered them for one final group session. I know you're all feeling overwhelmed, she began, her gentle voice a balm to their frayed nerves. What you're about to do is incredibly difficult, but I want you to remember something. You're not alone. Even when you're physically apart, you carry each other with you. The bonds you formed, the strength you found in each other, that doesn't disappear just because you're in different places. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, and she wasn't alone. Olivia was openly weeping, while James stared fixedly at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. Lily, looking so young and vulnerable, reached out to take Sarah's hand. You've all shown extraordinary courage, Doctor, Rossi continued, not just in facing danger, but in choosing to stand up for what's right, even at great personal cost. Carry that courage with you. Let it be your strength in the difficult days ahead. As the session concluded, there was a flurry of hugs and whispered goodbyes. Sarah held on to Olivia tightly, trying to convey in that embrace all the things she couldn't find words for. James, in a rare display of vulnerability, pulled them both into a bear hug. Stay safe, you two, he murmured, and kick some ass in court when the time comes. Lily clung to all of them in turn, her young face a mixture of fear and determination. We're going to win, right? She asked, her voice small but steady. We're going to stop them? Sarah knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. We are, she said firmly. I promise you, Lily. What happened to you? What's happening to others like you? We're going to put an end to it. As the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the safe house's lawn, it was time. Agent Reeves appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. It's time to move out, she announced. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. And above all, stay alert. Sarah took one last look around the safe house, at the cluttered command center where they'd planned their next moves, at the kitchen where they'd shared late-night conversations and moments of quiet support. In just a few days, This place had become more of a home than her sterile apartment ever had. As they stepped outside, the cool evening air carried with it a sense of finality. 3 nondescript sedans waited in the driveway, engines idling softly. Sarah watched as Olivia was ushered into one, James into another. Then it was her turn. She climbed into the back seat of the last car, Lily sliding in beside her. 2 stern-faced agents occupied the front seats, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. As the car pulled away from the curb, Sarah allowed herself one last glance back at the safe house. Agent Reeves stood in the doorway, her posture rigid, watching them go. And there, just visible in an upstairs window, was Dr. Rossi, raising a hand in a final farewell. Then they turned a corner, and the safe house vanished from view. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her new identity settling over her like a cloak. She was Emily Taylor now. Emily Taylor, who was brave and determined and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Beside her, Lily, now Sophie, fidgeted nervously with the strap of her seatbelt. Sarah reached over, gently squeezing the girl's hand. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "We're in this together." As the car merged onto the highway, leaving Seattle and their old lives behind, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. The road ahead was long and uncertain, fraught with danger and the weight of responsibility. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive, truly part of something greater than herself. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, Sarah knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. And together, they just might change the world. The lights of Seattle faded in the rearview mirror as they drove into the gathering darkness, towards a future none of them could have imagined just days ago. The battle against Volkov and his network was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The journey stretched on through the night, a blur of darkened highways and brief, tense stops at out-of-the-way gas stations. Sarah found herself constantly on edge, scanning every face they passed, every vehicle that lingered too long behind them. Beside her, Lily had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting against the window as she slept fitfully. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Sarah realized they had crossed into Idaho. The landscape had changed, the dense forests of Washington giving way to rolling hills and expansive farmland. It was beautiful in a stark sort of way, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being exposed, vulnerable. "We'll be stopping soon," the agent in the passenger seat announced, breaking the long silence. "There's a safe house about an hour from here where we'll rest and regroup." Sarah nodded, gently shaking Lily awake. The girl blinked owlishly, disorientation giving way to remembrance as the events of the past few days came rushing back. "Where are we?" Lily asked, her voice hoarse from sleep. "Idaho," Sarah replied softly. "We're going to stop soon, get some real rest." As they pulled up to an unassuming farmhouse, surrounded by fields of wheat swaying gently in the morning breeze, Sarah felt a twinge of unease. It seemed too quiet, too isolated, but the agents moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping the perimeter before ushering them inside. The interior of the farmhouse was a stark contrast to its rustic exterior. State-of-the-art security systems blinked silently from every corner, and the windows were reinforced with what Sarah suspected was bulletproof glass. "Get some sleep," one of the agents instructed, gesturing towards a hallway lined with bedrooms. "We move again at nightfall." Despite her exhaustion, Sarah found sleep elusive. She lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Were Olivia and James safe? Had they made it to their destinations? And what about the bigger picture? Was their disappearance already making waves, putting pressure on Volkov and his network? A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, her young face etched with worry. "I can't sleep," she admitted. Can I stay with you for a while?" Sarah nodded, scooting over to make room. As Lily settled beside her, Sarah was struck by how young the girl looked, how vulnerable. It was easy to forget, in the midst of all the chaos and danger, that Lily was just a teenager, thrust into a world of adult complexities and terrors. "Do you think we'll ever go home?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah considered her words carefully. She wanted to offer comfort, but she also knew the importance of honesty. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I do know that what we're doing, it's going to help a lot of people. It's going to stop others from going through what you went through." Lily nodded, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. Sarah pulled her close, offering what comfort she could. As Lily's breathing eventually evened out into sleep, Sarah found her own eyelids growing heavy. She drifted off, one arm protectively curled around the girl who had become, in many ways, the heart of their mission. They were awakened several hours later by a commotion downstairs. Sarah was instantly alert, years of caution crystallizing into razor-sharp focus. She motioned for Lily to stay quiet as she crept to the door, straining to hear. "Compromised," a voice was saying urgently. "We need to move now." Sarah's heart raced. Had they been found? Was Volkov's network already closing in? She was about to wake Lily when her bedroom door burst open. One of their security agents stood there, his face grim. "We've got a situation," he said tersely. "The safe house in Oregon was hit. We're not sure how they found it, but we have to assume all our locations are compromised." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Olivia? James?" The agent shook his head. "No word yet. We're implementing emergency protocol Delta. You and the girl need to be ready to move in 5 minutes." As the agent left to make preparations, Sarah turned to Lily, who was now fully awake and visibly terrified. "It's going to be okay," Sarah said, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "We've trained for this, remember? We just need to stay focused and follow the plan." They dressed quickly, grabbing the go bags that had been prepared for just such an eventuality. As they made their way downstairs, Sarah could hear the agents arguing in hushed, urgent tones. "Can't risk standard extraction," one was saying. "We need to split up, use the back roads, and leave them unprotected. It's too dangerous." The lead agent, a stern-faced woman named Carter, cut through the debate. "We don't have a choice. Chun and the girl will go with Thompson. Roberts, you're with me. We'll create a diversion, draw them off if they're out there." Sarah's mind reeled. They were being separated from half their security detail? It seemed insane, but as she met Agent Carter's eyes, she saw the grim determination there. This wasn't a decision made lightly. "Mrs. Giroux said, her voice low and urgent. From this point on, you're on your own. Trust no one. Use the emergency protocols we've drilled. And whatever happens, keep that girl safe. She's the key to bringing this whole operation down." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer just a witness, no longer just a pawn in this dangerous game. She was now Lily's protector, perhaps her only hope of survival. As they stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness, the air thick with tension, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm descend over her. The fear was still there, churning in her gut, but it was overshadowed by a steely resolve. They had come too far, risked too much, to fail now. Agent Thompson ushered them into a battered pickup truck, a far cry from the sleek sedan they'd arrived in. "Stay low," he instructed as they pulled away from the farmhouse. "We'll be taking back roads, avoiding main highways. With any luck, we'll make it to the next safe house by nightfall." As they drove into the gathering light, leaving behind the relative safety of the farmhouse, Sarah found herself thinking of Olivia and James. Were they safe? Had they managed to evade whatever threat had found the Oregon safe house? The not knowing was almost worse than any concrete danger. Beside her, Lily sat in tense silence, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Sarah reached over, giving the girl's hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're going to be okay," she said softly. "We're going to make it through this." As the sun rose fully, bathing the Idaho landscape in golden light, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. Just days ago, she had been Sarah Chun, a cautious accountant whose biggest worry was balancing her budget. Now, she was Emily Taylor, a woman on the run, carrying secrets that could bring down a global criminal empire. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger at every turn. But as Sarah looked at Lily, saw the trust and determination in the girl's eyes, she knew that she would do whatever it took to see this through. They had stumbled into this fight by chance, but they would see it to its end by choice. The pickup truck rumbled down dusty back roads, carrying its precious cargo towards an uncertain future. Behind them, the farmhouse safe house receded into the distance. And somewhere out there, Volkov and his network were hunting them, determined to silence the witnesses who threatened to unravel everything. But Sarah was ready. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, she would meet them head-on. For Lily, for Olivia and James, for all the nameless victims of Volkov's cruel empire, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. As the battered pickup truck wound its way through the back roads of Idaho, the landscape seemed to blur into an endless tapestry of wheat fields and distant mountains. Sarah's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Every distant vehicle, a potential threat. Every crossroads, a possible ambush point. Agent Thompson drove with a focused intensity, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The radio crackled occasionally with coded messages, brief bursts of information that did little to ease the tension in the cab. It was nearing midday when Thompson suddenly tensed, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "We've got a tail," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Black SUV, about half a mile back. They're trying to be subtle, but they're definitely following us." Sarah's heart raced as she fought the urge to turn and look. Beside her, Lily had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Thompson's jaw clenched. "There's a small town about 10 miles ahead. We're going to have to try and lose them there. When I give the word, you two need to be ready to move fast. Understand?" Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through the emergency protocols they drilled. Find cover, separate if necessary. Use the burner phones only as a last resort. As they approached the town, little more than a main street with a handful of shops and a small park, Thompson began to accelerate. "Get ready," he said tersely. They rounded a corner, the pickup's tires screeching in protest. Thompson yanked the wheel hard, sending them down a narrow alley between two buildings. The truck skidded to a halt behind a dumpster. "Go," Thompson barked. "There's a bus station 2 blocks east. Use your cover IDs. Get tickets to anywhere. I'll try to draw them off." Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed Lily's hand and they bolted from the truck, keeping low as they darted from shadow to shadow. Behind them, she could hear the roar of engines, shouts of confusion. They reached the bus station, a dingy building that had seen better days, just as a Greyhound was pulling in. Sarah approached the ticket counter, her heart pounding but her voice steady as she purchased 2 tickets to Boise. As they boarded the bus, Sarah allowed herself a momentary hope that they'd lost their pursuers. But as the bus pulled away from the station, she caught a glimpse of men in dark suits rushing into the building, their faces twisted with frustrated rage. The bus ride to Boise was a tense affair. Sarah and Lily sat near the back, trying to look inconspicuous among the handful of other passengers. Every stop along the way was a moment of terror, each new passenger a potential threat. It was late afternoon when they finally reached Boise. Sarah led Lily off the bus, her eyes constantly scanning for any sign of pursuit. They needed a plan, a way to contact the FBI without exposing themselves. As they walked down a busy street, trying to blend in with the afternoon crowd, Sarah's burner phone suddenly vibrated. She pulled it out with trembling hands, seeing a text from an unknown number, Pier 91, where it all began. Midnight. Sarah's mind raced. The message had to be from one of their team, Olivia or James, or maybe even Agent Reeves. But it could also be a trap, a way for Volkov's people to lure them out. "What is it?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah hesitated, then made a decision. They'd come too far to start keeping secrets now. She showed Lily the message, watching as understanding dawned in the girl's eyes. "It's where you saved me," Lily said softly. Do you think it's really them?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I don't know, but I think we have to risk it. It might be our only chance to reconnect, to figure out what's going on." They spent the next few hours cautiously making their way to the airport, using cash to purchase tickets to Seattle. Every step of the way, Sarah expected to feel a heavy hand on her shoulder, to hear the click of a gun being cocked. But somehow, miraculously, they made it. As their plane took off, soaring into the darkening sky, Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it through this. They landed in Seattle with barely an hour to spare before the midnight meeting. Sarah's nerves were frayed, every sense on high alert as they made their way to the waterfront. Pier 91 loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the night sky. As they approached, Sarah saw a figure standing at the end of the pier. Her heart leapt as she recognized the stance, the way the person held themselves. "Olivia!" she called out, unable to contain herself. The figure turned, and Sarah's joy turned to ice in her veins. It wasn't Olivia. The face that looked back at her was one she'd seen in nightmares, one that had haunted her thoughts for days. Viktor Volkov smiled, a cold, predatory grin that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Ms. Chen," he said, his accented voice carrying easily across the quiet pier. "Or should I say, Miss Taylor? I'm so glad you could join us." From the shadows, more figures emerged. Sarah saw James, his face bruised and bloodied, held at gunpoint by one of Volkov's thugs. And there was Olivia, her eyes wide with fear and regret. "I'm sorry," Olivia choked out. "They found us. They made me send the message. I didn't have a choice." Sarah's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out, but they were surrounded, outnumbered. Lily clung to her side, trembling but defiant. Volkov spread his hands in a gesture of false magnanimity. "You've led us on quite a chase, Miss Chen. I must admit, I'm impressed. But surely you must see that it's over now. You cannot win against me." Sarah straightened, meeting Volkov's cold gaze with a fire of... "It's not about winning," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the pier. "It's about doing what's right. And no matter what you do to us, others will take up the fight. You can't silence the truth forever, Volkov." For a moment, something flickered in Volkov's eyes. A hint of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold fury. "You should have stayed an accountant, Miss Chun," he snarled. "You might have lived longer." He raised his hand, clearly about to give the order to his men. Sarah tensed, preparing for the worst. But before Volkov could speak, the night exploded into chaos. Bright lights suddenly flooded the pier, momentarily blinding everyone. The thunder of helicopter rotors filled the air, and voices boomed from all directions. "FBI, freeze, weapons down." In the confusion that followed, Sarah acted on instinct. She pulled Lily down, shielding the girl with her body as gunfire erupted around them. She caught glimpses of figures in tactical gear swarming the pier, of Volkov's men being taken down with precision. And then, suddenly, it was over. The gunfire ceased, replaced by the sound of shouted orders and the clink of handcuffs. Sarah looked up to see Volkov on his knees, rage twisting his features as he was restrained. A familiar voice called out to her. "Sarah, Lily." Agent Reeves appeared, her face etched with concern and relief. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" Sarah nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. "We're okay. But how?" Reeves smiled grimly. "Your friend James. When they caught him, he managed to activate a hidden tracker. We've been following, waiting for the right moment to strike. And thanks to you drawing them out, we were able to take down not just Volkov, but half his top lieutenants." As the reality of their situation sank in, Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was over. They had won. The nightmare that had consumed their lives for the past week was finally at an end. She looked around, seeing Olivia and James being tended to by paramedics. Lily stood beside her, tears streaming down her face, but a smile of pure relief lighting up her features. In that moment, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Sarah Chun, no longer Emily Taylor, no longer a woman in hiding, felt a profound sense of change settle over her. The world she was stepping into now was different from the one she'd left behind. It was a world where ordinary people could stand up to evil, where courage and determination could triumph over greed and cruelty. As Agent Reeves led them towards a waiting vehicle, promising debriefings and protective custody and a chance to finally rest, Sarah took one last look at the pier where it had all begun. So much had changed, so much had been lost, but something had been gained too. A sense of purpose, of belonging to something greater than herself. Whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead in bringing Volkov and his network to justice, Sarah knew one thing for certain. She was ready to face it. Not alone, but with the family she had found in this crucible of danger and courage. Olivia, James, Lily. They had started this journey as strangers, thrown together by chance and circumstance. They would finish it as something much more. As the sun rose over Seattle, painting the sky in hues of hope, Sarah Chun stepped forward into her new life, ready to continue the fight for justice, no matter where it might lead. The end of one chapter, but the beginning of so much more. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!